Science now confirms what the Stoics intuited centuries ago. The brain organizes information, processes emotion, and even rehearses responses to future challenges, all while you sleep. So, whatever emotional state or mental content you bring into that space, your brain treats as important. If you sleep angry, anxious, or scrolling through chaos, your brain stores that emotional tone, and you wake up already shaped by it. This is why Stoics practiced evening reflection, not because it was cute or spiritual, but because it was strategic. They understood that what you rehearse becomes who you are. And if your final thoughts before sleep are thoughts of fear, comparison, regret, or shallow stimulation, you're training your subconscious to normalize that chaos. Plato believed the soul was divided into three parts: the rationale, the spirited, and the appetitive. And when those were in harmony, a person could live with virtue. But when they were in conflict, inner suffering followed. Nighttime for the Stoics was a time to restore that inner harmony, to remind the rational part of its power, to calm the emotional storms, to quiet the cravings of the body and bring everything back to center. So the next day, you didn't have to fight yourself. You could just be yourself. But what have we done instead? We've turned bedtime into a battleground. Screens blast us with images. Our thoughts spiral through worries we can't control. We replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, and let external noise seep into the most vulnerable space of the day. We don't prepare for rest. We collapse into it, hoping for peace without actually creating it. The Stoics would have found that tragic, because to them, sleep was a ritual of power, not weakness. It was a time to reconnect with nature's rhythm, to remember that we are not machines meant to run 24/7, but humans built to cycle between action and renewal. Nature does nothing in vain, Aristotle wrote, and that includes sleep. It's not wasted time, it's necessary time. If you use it well, it doesn't just heal your body, it refines your mind. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What you feed your unconscious before bed becomes the foundation of your waking life. That's why the Stoics guarded the gate to their sleep. They didn't allow anything to enter lightly. They chose their final thoughts with care because they knew those thoughts would echo long after the eyes closed. So maybe it's time to stop treating sleep like a shutdown and start treating it like a ceremony, a daily rite of passage from one version of yourself to the next. You can fill that space with fear or with philosophy, with mindless content or with timeless wisdom. The choice is yours. But what you choose will shape more than just your dreams. It will shape your discipline, your energy, your emotional resilience. All the things that define who you are when you're awake. And if you're seeking strength, calm, and control, not as a fantasy but as a lived experience, it doesn't start with a productivity hack. It starts with what the Stoics knew, that how you end your day is how you build your life. And the thoughts you fall asleep with, they don't just disappear, they become your reality. It's not always the long hours or endless to-do lists that leave us drained. It's the emotional clutter we carry, quiet, invisible, but heavy. Most people go to bed believing they're just physically tired, but what they're really experiencing is the weight of unspoken frustration, unresolved conversations, and lingering disappointments. The kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They knew that true fatigue begins in the mind, not the muscles. And yet today, we rarely think to ask ourselves what emotional baggage we're dragging into the night, or how it's silently shaping the way we wake up. You might have noticed it yourself. You sleep for 8 hours, but wake up feeling like you haven't rested at all. That's not just poor sleep hygiene. It's the residue of thoughts that were never sorted, emotions that were never released. Aristotle believed that moderation and balance were the key to a well-lived life. But emotional imbalance, especially when ignored, accumulates like noise in the background. A single moment of irritation left unaddressed turns into hours of internal replays. A small failure, instead of being let go, morphs into a self-judgment loop that runs even in your dreams. Think about how much space these emotions take up. You replay a disagreement from earlier, analyzing what you should have said. You anticipate a meeting tomorrow with dread, rehearsing worst-case scenarios in your head. These thoughts aren't productive, but they feel urgent. That's the trap. They masquerade as necessary planning, but they're really just emotional clutter, disguised as preparation. Carl Jung warned us that what you resist not only persists, but grows. When we don't acknowledge and release emotional weight, it doesn't go away, it compounds. And here's where it gets dangerous. Emotional clutter doesn't just make you tired, it changes your perception. You become more reactive, more defensive, less creative. The mind, when overloaded with unresolved emotion, starts interpreting even neutral situations through a lens of stress. A simple email feels like a personal attack. A quiet room feels like loneliness. You lose your ability to respond calmly because the internal space needed for clarity is already crowded. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And this is the perfect example. Emotional clutter creates imaginary battles and then convinces you they're real. Sleep is supposed to be a reset, a full system reboot. But for many, it becomes just another arena where the day's emotions continue to fight for attention. The brain doesn't shut off at night, it processes, it replays, and it sorts through everything you didn't resolve during the day. That's why going to bed without clearing emotional residue leads to vivid dreams, restlessness, and waking up already in a mental fog. The Stoics would say this is preventable, but only if you're willing to do the work. Not complicated work, but intentional. A few minutes of genuine self-reflection. A quiet moment to ask, what am I holding on to that I don't need to carry anymore? This is not about suppressing emotions. It's about detaching from them with clarity. There's a difference between feeling something and being consumed by it. The Stoics didn't believe in pretending life was always calm. They faced pain, loss, and uncertainty with open eyes. But they trained their minds not to hold on to what couldn't be controlled. They believed that emotional discipline wasn't cold, it was courageous. Letting go doesn't mean you're numb. It means you've chosen peace over chaos, clarity over clutter. And don't underestimate how fast emotional clutter builds. It doesn't take major life events. It builds from the little things. A moment of self-doubt, a comment from someone that landed wrong, a task you didn't finish and now feel guilty about. Left unchecked, these stack up silently until the weight becomes unbearable. But because we're used to this internal noise, we normalize it. We tell ourselves it's just stress, it's just life. But it isn't. It's accumulated, unattended emotional energy that hasn't been processed or released. This is why the Stoics emphasized daily mental hygiene. Just as you wash your face and brush your teeth, they believed in cleansing the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." That tranquility doesn't appear by accident. It's a result of intentional clearing every night before the clutter turns into fatigue, burnout, or emotional numbness. You don't need an hour. You don't need a ritual with candles and soft music. You need awareness. You need honesty. You need to be willing to sit with your thoughts and feel what needs to be felt, and then release what no longer serves a purpose. Ask yourself, did anything today make me feel small, angry, insecure, or ashamed? Not to dwell, but to identify. Because the moment you name it, you give yourself the power to release it. This practice becomes even more important when life feels overwhelming. When everything's moving fast, emotional clutter builds even faster. That's when stillness becomes not a luxury, but a necessity. You won't find stillness by accident. You have to create it, and the best time to do that is right before sleep, when your mind is most vulnerable to suggestion, most open to transformation. The same way you don't go to bed with dirty clothes. Don't go to bed with a dirty mind, cluttered with thoughts that steal your peace. Emotional clarity is a form of strength, and like any strength, it's built in small moments. Choosing not to replay that insult, choosing not to carry that insecurity, choosing not to give power to a fear that hasn't even materialized. Every choice you make before bed either adds to the clutter or clears it. And the beautiful part is, you don't need to fix everything before sleep. You just need to let go of the idea that you must fix everything right now. Plato taught that the first and best victory is to conquer self. Emotional clutter makes that victory impossible. It keeps you at war with yourself, with your past, with your fears. But the path to peace isn't complicated. It's choosing, moment by moment, to release, to not argue with reality, to not grip so tightly to things already gone. You'll know you've started this process when you stop needing to win your arguments in your head, when you stop obsessing over what they meant or how you came across. You'll start to feel lighter, not because the world changed, but because you did. Because you've begun to understand that peace doesn't come from controlling every detail. It comes from refusing to be ruled by thoughts that only exist to exhaust you. Emotional clutter is the real source of exhaustion, not your schedule, not your responsibilities, not even the chaos around you. It's the chaos within, and it can be cleared, night after night, choice by choice, until you wake up not just rested, but free. Most people try to add more to their lives when they're feeling overwhelmed. More motivation, more productivity hacks, more goals. But what if the real answer wasn't about adding anything? What if it was about letting go? That's the heart of mental detox. And no, it's not a trendy self-help buzzword. It's a return to something deeply human, something the Stoics practiced religiously. The ability to clear the mind, not fill it. To free yourself, not fix yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." That's the key. It's not just what happens to you, it's what you carry. Letting go isn't forgetting. It's not pretending nothing happened. It's giving yourself permission to stop carrying something that's already done its damage. Think about how much you're holding on to right now. Past regrets, someone else's opinion of you, the fear of not being enough, or the pressure to be more than you are. These aren't facts. They're weights, invisible ones, but your nervous system treats them like a real burden. Your shoulders tense, your chest tightens, your sleep gets lighter. Because even when the moment has passed, the residue remains. And here's the catch. Mental clutter multiplies. One small insecurity becomes a cascade of negative thoughts. One bad interaction colors your whole day. Carl Jung warned us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's what letting go protects you from, living under the illusion that your emotions are you. They're not. They're visitors. And just like any guest, not all of them deserve a place to stay. The process starts with awareness. You can't release what you refuse to name. That's why journaling works. Not because it magically solves your problems, but because it pulls the chaos out of your mind and puts it somewhere else. Writing is a form of detachment. It says, "This belongs to me, but it isn't me." That separation creates room, and in that room, clarity begins to form. Not dramatic, not instant, but steady and honest. The next step is acceptance. Not everything you're holding on to will come with closure. Some people won't apologize. Some situations won't make sense. Letting go doesn't mean you understand it all. It means you've decided not to let confusion or resentment run your life. Socrates believed the unexamined life wasn't worth living. But here's the mistake many people make. They examine their pain so long that they forget to release it. The goal isn't to overthink your experience. It's to understand it enough to say, I've learned what I needed to. Now it's time to move forward. A real mental detox isn't a one-time event. It's a daily choice, like cleaning a room before bed. You don't wait for it to become unlivable. You maintain it, little by little. A few minutes of quiet, a walk without your phone, a single page of journaling, saying no when you want to please, saying yes when you're afraid. These seem small, but every one of them is a message to your mind. I'm not here to carry what doesn't serve me anymore. Letting go doesn't make you soft. It sharpens your focus. You begin to see what matters. You realize not every thought deserves your time. Not every emotion deserves a response. Not every situation requires your energy. Aristotle taught that virtue lies in the balance between extremes. Letting go is that balance between caring and obsessing, between being responsible and being self-sacrificing, between awareness and control. And there's a kind of strength that comes with releasing something painful, not because it wasn't real, but because you're choosing peace over proof. You don't need to win the argument in your head. You don't need to justify your pain to anyone. You just need to decide that peace is more valuable than being right. That clarity is more powerful than closure, and that your mind deserves to be free. Mental detox is really about trust. Trusting that what's behind you doesn't need to be dragged forward. Trusting that your mind is more powerful when it's not crowded. Trusting that letting go isn't loss, it's liberation. And when you start doing that, even in small ways, you begin to notice something else. You breathe deeper, your thoughts slow down. Your inner voice gets quieter, not silent, but less chaotic. And in that quiet, something remarkable happens. You start to feel like yourself again. This is what the Stoics were after. Not a perfect life, but a peaceful one. A mind that's not always chasing, not always fighting, not always replaying, just steady, present, and free from the weight of what no longer belongs. So the next time your mind feels heavy, don't ask what you need to do. Ask what you're ready to release. That's where the real power lives. Most people go to bed thinking they need to fix something. A broken relationship, an unfinished task, a regret from earlier in the day. The mind stays active, not because there's action to take, but because it's unwilling to let the thought pass. And that's the real problem. It's not that we're thinking too much, it's that we're refusing to stop. The mind believes that if it just thinks one more time, it will finally figure everything out. But the truth is, most of the time, there's nothing to solve. There's only something to release. There's a difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection is clarity. It helps you grow, understand, and move forward. Rumination, though, is a trap. It feels like you're being productive because you're thinking so intensely, but you're really just spinning in circles. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." The more you try to force closure with your thoughts, the more power they take. You can't force the mind to settle by adding more thought to it, just like you can't calm a storm by shouting over the wind. The world teaches us that we must always act, always fix, always improve. But sometimes the deepest wisdom comes from doing nothing, from letting a thought rise and fall without grabbing onto it. Not every emotion needs a response. Not every problem is meant to be handled at midnight. Sleep is not the time to sort through everything. It's the time to let it float by, like clouds passing through an open sky. That's not avoidance, it's wisdom. We've been conditioned to treat every thought like an emergency, something urgent, something important. But think about how